Hi everybody, I'm Amber Danae Wright and this is my story. The question that most people have been asking me along this journey is how did I find out about my cancer? So I thought that I would take the opportunity in this beautiful place that is Grootbos to share my story and how I got diagnosed with breast cancer. When I was 18, I found a tiny little lump in my right breast. And my first trip to the gynae, it was diagnosed as a fibroadenoma. They are little lumps that are very common in young women and are caused by hormones, and most young women have them. They're very common and they're not harmful. So right before lockdown in March of this year, I suddenly felt that this lump in my right breast had gotten really big and I hadn't noticed it growing. It was actually quite a shock when I felt how big it had gotten. But even upon finding it and feeling it, I was convinced that it was a fibroadenoma and that I didn't have too much to worry about. And when lockdown lifted, I was able to book with my gynecologist. And I went to see her and she was comfortable that it was big enough to be taken out. And she said if it was bothering me, then it definitely should be taken out. And she referred me to a breast surgeon who I saw the next week. And he said to me that due to how bad COVID was at the moment, because this was right in the peak of COVID, that he would not go in for any surgeries right now if we didn't have to. So I left there feeling quite happy and comfortable with that. And a few weeks went by and I had a really bad weekend. I'd slept on my side and it really started to bother me. So I rephoned the surgeon and it had now been 2 months that had passed. And when I spoke to him, he was comfortable that COVID was under control at the hospital and that we could go ahead and do the surgery. I went in on the Thursday and it was quite a traumatic thing. I've only ever had 2 surgeries and both of those times Nick and my parents were there with me before I went in and when I came out. So going to the hospital alone was something daunting on its own and something that I don't think is natural. I think that, you know, when you're going in for any kind of surgery, no matter how big or small, you want people there to support you. So it was a very tough thing to go through on my own and to not be able to have anybody there with me. And I went into surgery and they removed the lump. And I was in a lot of pain. I spent that whole weekend in bed, not really able to lie down nicely. Everything was quite uncomfortable and I was in quite a lot of discomfort and pain. And on that Thursday, the 13th of August, I had a scheduled appointment to go see the surgeon again for him to assess the wound and to remove the non-dissolvable stitches. And I went into the rooms and they cut the stitches out and the nurse confirmed that the cut looked really good and that it was healing really nicely. I hadn't been able to see it because it had been taped up for that week. And so she said she was very happy with how it looked, and the surgeon came in and also said he was happy but that I had a lot of bruising. I was really bruised and he said that they may need to drain it at some stage if the bruising hasn't all come down. And after that he said if I could please come into his office to have a chat. And at this stage I still wasn't afraid. I didn't even know I had anything to be afraid of. You know, when you're 27, the last thing on your mind is breast cancer. And I went into his office and I sat across the table from him, and in a blink of an eye my life changed forever. And he said the words to me that I had shocked them all, that it was not what they had expected, because in fact the lump that they removed was in fact breast cancer. And I can barely remember that moment because I think you go into a total state of shock. It literally felt like my entire world came crashing down around me. The words that change your life forever, when they get spoken to you, it's paralyzing. And I remember from the moment he said those words, I couldn't think, I couldn't hear, I felt like I couldn't even breathe. And he proceeded to go on with explaining the type of cancer I had, which is stage 1 type 2 invasive duct carcinoma. And from there he explained what the stages meant, what the types meant, and then he went into the treatment plan and he started using words like BRCA1, BRCA2, chemotherapy, fertility, all these big scary words, and I was barely able to contain my tears. I remember just looking out the window thinking, this isn't my life. I've walked into someone else's life. This is the wrong movie. I'm the wrong person to be here. How can this be happening? And he was drawing pictures, and I mean, just the words chemotherapy paralyzed me. You know, I'd only ever seen people go through chemotherapy on television, on TV shows, on movies, in movies. And we were actually at the time watching A Million Little Things. And in that show, the girl Maggie goes through, or has breast cancer and goes through chemotherapy. And I just remember seeing her with her bald head and running in her beanies and looking so sick. And that's the image that flashed into my mind when he started saying chemotherapy. And so that was how I was diagnosed. From there, we basically just rolled into a series of appointments. And for the next 3 weeks, I just literally was going with the motions. I went from appointment to appointment to appointment. And one of the big things about having to rush into chemotherapy was doing fertility. So both my doctors, my oncologist and my surgeon had said that because there's a risk that chemotherapy can damage your ovaries, we would have to do fertility. So that was one of the first things that we did. I started hormone injections quite soon after I was diagnosed, and they harvested my eggs and we froze embryos. And I also went for genetics testing, and they tested me for the big 8 cancer genes, or the genes that, if there are variances in them, cause cancer. And all glory to God and thank God, I didn't have any of those. So there was no genetic mutation, which ultimately meant that I wouldn't have to have a double mastectomy, which was obviously something I was very afraid of. And the reason that I had to start chemotherapy quite soon was because I had there's an indicator for how fast the cancer grows or spreads, and mine was quite high, and so they wanted me to start chemotherapy very, very soon. So as soon as we'd done the fertility, and as soon as we had that sorted and a backup plan if, God forbid, I wasn't able to conceive naturally later on, we had chemotherapy scheduled, and in September I started chemotherapy. And I remember waking up that morning. We'd spent a weekend doing fun things. My sisters took me to the West Coast National Park. I had dinner with my family on the Saturday night and dinner with Nick on the Friday night, trying to just do all my favorite things before I felt like my life was going to change forever. And it did. I think from the moment I was diagnosed, my life did change. It'll never be the same again. I'll never be the same person that I was. But that Monday I was afraid. And to be honest, if I'm honest, I've been afraid for every single chemo session I've had up until now. Tomorrow will be my 7th. And it's a tough journey. Every day you live with this thing, you can't escape it. And obviously one of the biggest challenges I faced was the fear of losing my hair, which was something I was very afraid of. You place so much of your identity in your hair, and I've always had beautiful hair and people have always complimented me on my hair, and I was afraid of what I'd look like. I was afraid of, would I lose my eyebrows, would I lose my eyelashes, was I going to look like Smeagol in the Lord of the Rings? That was what I was afraid of. And exactly 2 weeks after my first chemo session, my hair started to fall out. I woke up in the morning and there was hair on my pillow. And slowly as that week went on, the hair started to fall out. And it fell out on the floor, and it fell out at my office, and it was all over my clothes. And I'd spoken to a few girls that had said eventually it becomes so overwhelming. Luckily I had so much hair that you wouldn't even notice. But that Saturday, I had it tied up the whole day, and I hadn't washed it that week because I was afraid when it got wet of what would happen. And that night I got into the shower and I started to shampoo my hair. And as I did this, I just felt the hair pulling out in the front here. And I just knew that this was the time that had come, the time that I'd been dreading. And the hair, it was such a crazy experience because the hair basically went into one huge big knot on my head. It was all in a clump like a bird's nest. And basically all around the front here, the hair had come out. And I called Nick into the bathroom and I said, what am I going to do? I tried to put conditioner and nothing happened. And he came into the bathroom and he looked at me and he said, my baby, I'm sorry, it's coming out. And I stood in the shower and I bawled my eyes out. And it was such a big thing for me. I was so afraid. and I was so upset. And after a couple of minutes of crying and sobbing in the shower, I said to him, just let's get it off. And he climbed into the shower with me with scissors, and he stood there and he cut my hair. And let me tell you, of all the experiences I never thought our marriage would have to go through, a picture I never thought we'd see, it was that. And Nick stood there and he cut my hair for about an hour in the shower, just trying to cut it short enough. And then we tried to shave it a bit, but we didn't have a very good shaver at home, but we managed to get most of it off. And I sat there in the chair in the bathroom, and Nick shaved my head until it was short enough that we could just go to sleep. And it was a bit patchy, so I looked a bit crazy, and I think he was terrified for me to see myself. But I walked to the mirror, and I think that the fear of it was so great that when I saw myself, I was just like, okay, I can live with this. And I just remember saying to him, I've got really cute ears, so I was really thankful for that. And that was one of the big moments that was finally over. And I just keep saying that once it was done, I didn't have to fear it anymore. And I was almost comforted by that this big, huge thing that I'd been fearing was over and I could move on. And the next day we went to my parents, and my dad completed the shaving of it. And eventually all the little hairs that were left eventually just fell out until I was completely bald. And so, yeah, we are now 2.5 months into treatment. And I'm now into the second chemo drug, so my treatments are weekly, and which is it's a challenge, rocking up to the hospital every week. You just feel like you've just gotten over it and you're back there. And so I will finish my treatment in January, and then there'll be a month's break, and then I will have to go in and have a lumpectomy. And basically that is to remove any of the contaminated tissue that the tumor was touching. So they have to go and get clear margins. So they go and they take 2 more centimeters of tissue out around where the tumor was. And so that is my story. I have been so comforted by so many people who have reached out and messaged me. I am constantly replying to people who just have shown so much kindness and who check in when they don't need to, and who follow up, and who message me and comment and WhatsApp me. And so I am surrounded by so many people supporting me. I have the very best husband and the very best family and amazing friends who have just been absolutely incredible support to me during this time. And I'm grateful for my faith, because every day that I get out of bed is a miracle from God that I can continue to walk this journey and continue to live my life in as good a way as I possibly can, and to be as positive as I possibly can. And so despite these challenges, I feel very blessed, and I know that I'm going to get through this, and I know that it's going to be challenging and it's going to be tough, but I'll get through it. And I definitely am going to be a better person. I'm going to be a stronger person. I think that I found a strength within me that I never knew I had. And I hope that by sharing my journey, I'll be able to help girls and women and anybody who has to face this terrible, terrible disease. And I hope that by sharing my journey, I can make everybody more aware. I think the biggest thing that we can do is create more awareness, because I didn't know that you could get breast cancer at 27. I didn't know. And so my hope is that girls will check themselves regularly, be aware of your bodies, know your bodies, and don't be surprised. Go for your checkups regularly, whatever that means, because if you catch it early, the world looks different. A higher stage cancer becomes much more complicated, and so I was very lucky to catch it at stage 1. And so I just hope that through this whole journey, I will be able to inspire you, I'll be able to motivate you, and I'll be able to show the world that cancer can't stop you. Cancer won't stop me. Breast cancer will not define me. It's a part of my life, and it'll always be a part of my life. But it's going to make me stronger, it's going to make me more faithful, it's going to make me a better person. And ultimately, I'm going to come out of this victorious. I'm going to be victorious. I will beat this thing. I'm so grateful to all of you for your support and your love. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being there for me. And thank you for praying for me, thinking about me, and caring for me. Have a beautiful, beautiful day. Mwah.